Money Arata. There are different economic schools, and each school offers different theories and answers to important questions that have an impact on our life, on our prosperity. And when you start to research in economic schools, you will find people who believe that they are refuting, but they're actually just insulting each other. They're calling each other as communists or liberals or Marxists, Austrians, Keynesians, Chicagoists, and this behavior is childish. And a synonym for childish is infantile. Infantile is a word of Latin origin. In means no. Fans means speech. Infantile is someone who cannot speak. That is why infantile is a word generally used to refer to babies. But we can also say that infantile is someone who cannot present logical arguments in a discussion. When the only thing that someone has to say, oh, this Austrian school, that is pure fiction. Or, whoa, 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 what a load of communist talk. That is infantile behavior. So someone who is in child mode cannot speak. They cannot articulate logical and strong arguments to agree or to disagree. The childish mode uses labeling to end the conversation, to avoid speaking, to infantilize the speech in an extreme way. And we find extremism when there is lack of interest in seeking knowledge just because a certain name was mentioned. What do you think of arguments like this one? I can't believe that you just quoted X economist. Or, oh, that influencer, John Doe, he's awful. He just follows this school of economics. Well, so what? Those are errors because the mere fact that someone that you dislike makes reference to a theory does not necessarily mean that the theory itself is bad. Those are infantile, those are extremist ways of refuting arguments. Be careful with extremism. The price to pay for extremism is ignorance. The extremist is someone who refuses to see, to acknowledge any other alternative. The extremist sticks to a school of economics as he would support his sports team, hoping for your team's victory and also celebrating the defeat of the opponents. And this is a behavioral mistake that leads to intellectual and financial impoverishment. When you're facing different schools of economics, there is a risk of blindness that will prevent you from reaching a good understanding. You should always seek the best ways to make money without sticking to just one single school of economy. And even though it deals with numbers, economics is not an exact science like physics or mathematics or statistics. Throughout history, there have emerged different schools of economic thought, and each one of them has advantages, disadvantages, and different ways of facing problems. Oftentimes, the same concept is interpreted in a certain way by one school and in a completely different way by another school. That does not mean that one of the economists is completely wrong and the other one is revealing the absolute truth. That is why you need to understand that there are different points of view on economics, and you need to keep on learning to avoid being indoctrinated by any single one of these theories. Critical thinking requires the understanding of the context in which every school of economics tries to understand the world, and only in that way you will be able to form an independent opinion. This is not financial advice. Please read the full disclaimer before proceeding. This same concept can have different meanings according to each school of economics. In the Money Arata series, we talked a lot about Bitcoin and other crypto assets because they are innovations that are changing the way the world deals with money. And in order to make a detailed analysis, we talk about economic concepts, such as inflation, monetary policies, supply, and demand. Take inflation, for example. Most of the time, inflation is defined as an increase in the price of goods and services that results in the decrease of purchasing power. That is a common concept, for example, in the Keynesian school. But if we take a look at another economic school, like the Austrian school, we'll see that inflation is an increase in the amount of circulating currency within an economy. So, the generalized increase in prices would be the consequence in this case. In fact, That was the concept that they used in the videos about cryptocurrency that spoke about inflation. As the Austrian school's ideas had a lot of influence on the creators of the first cryptocurrencies, it makes a lot of sense trying to understand the way cryptocurrencies work based on those concepts. Does that mean that one of these schools is completely right and the other one is completely wrong? Does that mean that one particular economist is lying on purpose to validate their theories? No. Sometimes it takes time for an economic theory to be proven right or wrong because the economists build their theories on the basis of the information that they have in their time. And that is why it is a mistake to stick to one economic school as if you're supporting your sports team, completely diminishing the other teams, or better said, the other schools. Frequently, what seems right today proves to be wrong tomorrow, and vice versa. For example, Thomas Malthus developed a theory that gained quite a lot of public interest, which predicted a catastrophic scenario. He said that the population was growing at an exponential rate, while the food production was growing linearly, and the result would be global hunger. And time proved that the Malthusian theory was completely wrong. But Malthus was not lying when he developed his theory, he just made his predictions with the information that he had at his time in the 18th century, in the early moments of the Industrial Revolution. Therefore, he could not predict the developments in the food production. And this is just one example, so now you're able to understand that economic theories change throughout time. And until a theory is proven wrong, it would be ideal for you to have an open mind and get to know the different points of view so you can avoid becoming ignorant or becoming indoctrinated by one single ideology. Economic theories are constantly being tested. Keep your mind open to benefit from the best of every idea. The practical problem of blindly following one school of economic thought is that if you are wrong, you will lose a lot of money. Try to understand how the world actually is. And with that, adjust your preferences about what school of economics has a more suited structure for you to understand the world. The mistake in your reasoning would be having a very strong emotional attachment to one school of economics, becoming an extremist, and failing to accept that reality is what it is because the world does not conform to your theory of your favorite economic model. It is the theory that has to be adapted to the reality, not the other way around. Unlike an exact science like mathematics or physics, economics is strongly influenced by human behavior, and human behavior changes a lot throughout time. For example, in the 18th century, the most influential economist was Adam Smith, who said that the invisible hand of the market can regulate everything without the need of state interventions. And later on the 19th century, you have Marx with his Communist Manifesto and had a radically different idea. He said that the individual interest was not best for the economy and the state should control the means of production to serve the common good. This conflict between free market and an economy that is totally controlled by the state continued for a long time. And we can say that the notion of free market started gaining more and more supporters. The concepts of this free market became known as the classical school, which was founded by Alfred Marshall. In the book Principles of Economics, Marshall came up with many terms that are still used today. But with the crisis in 1929, there were a lot of people who started questioning the efficiency of free market ideas. One of those people was John Maynard Keynes, and he argued that the free market doesn't correct itself quickly enough, and that is why a certain intervention of the state was needed to stimulate the economy and fight unemployment. Keynes didn't defend Marx's communism, but he didn't completely agree with Adam Smith's liberalism either. And governments really liked Keynes' ideas a lot. That makes sense from the leader's point of view because the interventionism idea itself has a lot to do with the concept of politicians having power. But in addition to Keynes, there are other important influences. The Austrian school has a far less interventionist vision, just like the Chicago School of Milton Friedman, and those two schools are often used by the new crypto economy, which is based on another school called monetarism. Now, are you confused? Now, this only proves the main point of our conversation here. There are a lot of different visions about economy, and they're always colliding and evolving. Do not get attached to the details, but be clear that there are several schools of economic thought and that they change over time. There are many schools of economics with fairly different views on how the world works. But you don't need to be worried about having a detailed understanding of a complicated economic theory that was invented centuries ago. What you need to be clear is about two things. First, economics is not an exact science. Therefore, the same concept can have different definitions according to each economic school. Second, that the theories of each economic school are put to the test over time. An idea created in a certain context may be right at that time, but it can prove to be wrong with changing technology, with new discoveries, or even changes in human behavior. Besides, theories are just theories. Reality is usually much more complex than our theories. Those who want to refute the argument of an economic school first need to try to understand the differences in perspective, and then they need to explain the logical reasons to prefer a certain approach and the reason why they disagree with other positions. The childish mode would be to just be wanting to know about your favorite school of economics and straight away start labeling the opposite schools without even trying to have the slightest understanding about them. That labeling is an extremism because it refuses to exercise logical thought. That is why you must always keep learning. Try to broaden your knowledge by reading about different ideas, including ideas that you do not agree with as much. And that will expand your ability to act, it will give you more control over your own money, preventing you from being indoctrinated and becoming a prisoner of an idea that could be proven wrong in a short period of time. Economics is not an exact science like physics, mathematics, or statistics. Along history, there have been emerged different schools of economic thought, and each one of them has advantages, disadvantages, and different ways to deal with problems. You need to understand that there are different approaches to economy, and to keep learning to avoid being indoctrinated in any of these theories. So do not stick to an ideology as if it was a team sport. Don't completely dismiss other economic school ideas. Otherwise, you could end up becoming a prisoner of an idea that will make you lose a lot of money over time. For example, traditional economists were alerting against the risks of investing in Bitcoin for over a decade. They were saying that cryptocurrencies didn't have any foundation, any backing, and those who listened faithfully to those economists without questioning, without having economic thought, they simply didn't reap the profit, the most valuable asset in the planet's history, with gains of more than 100,000%. The reason why traditional economists were not able to understand Bitcoin's potential and why some of them still do not recommend this asset is because they are too attached to conservative points of view and they don't have an interest in studying what Bitcoin is. If you are interested in truly understanding what Bitcoin is, I invite you now to watch a special class by visiting arata.se/Bitcoin class.